Welcome to the Daily Dawg podcast. Today is Friday, October 24th. This is episode 36 of the Daily Dawg podcast. Thank you for joining us today. Today is, we're going to do just what we're going to call our off-week musings today. We're nearing the end of the off week. There's no game on Saturday this week. We'll be taking on the hated Gators down in Jacksonville on the following Saturday, which will be Saturday, November 1st. But this Saturday, October 25th, we get a day off. You can spend it with your family, go out, and hopefully you have nice weather, maybe watch some other games. There are some interesting games out there in the SEC, some other teams to pay attention to if you just want to see what's going on in college football when you're not just following the Dogs. But for me and mine, I think I'll be pulling back a little bit from college football, focusing on getting some content ready for the Daily Dawg, getting ready for our Gator Hater Week, where we focus on all things terrible Gators. And I do have a little bit of preview about that. I think I'll go ahead and jump in and lead off with that. I've mentioned several times about my own personal experiences when it comes to these rivalries in college football. And so I started a school at the University of Georgia, as I've said many a time, in 1989. And so we actually won the Florida game that year and then would go on to lose 12 of the next, or is it 13 of the next 14? I'm sorry, 13 of the next 14 games. So I distinctly remember we were having a very mediocre season. It was Ray Goff's first season. We went 6-6 that year, and Florida was a higher ranked team, and we went to the Gator Bowl and we won 17-10. Rodney Hampton was our great tailback of the time. Georgia always, as I've mentioned many a time, and as you well know, often featured great running backs, and it was just one succession of another of let's play good defense, run the ball, run the damn ball, and try and eke out a win. And that's certainly what Georgia did in this game. They won 17-10 behind a good day from Rodney Hampton. Emmitt Smith would have been the tailback for Florida in the opposing tailback. I'm pretty sure Emmitt Smith was playing. I should have looked that one up. But so it was an interesting matchup, but Spurrier had not yet taken over. He would take over soon, and then the whole rivalry would change complexion. We go on to lose, and that was my first experience, was just an ever-building hatred of the Gators, watching my new favorite team, the school that I was at, get beat over and over again by the Gators. But I remember everybody saying, oh yeah, they were a better team, and just sort of being amazed that we actually had beaten a better team in Florida, having such a mediocre season that my freshman year in 1989. And I remember people saying, oh, we always beat the Gators, and so that was kind of the introduction. And up to that point we did. Georgia pretty much won, probably 3 out of 4 games if you go back and you look through the history of the series. But that would turn when Spurrier got there. Spurrier always had a special hatred for UGA, as most of you probably know. And like I said, they would go on to win 13 of the next 14 games. They'd win 7 in a row, and then we would win the one game in 1997, which was a great game. That would be when Jim Donnan had taken over, and Robert Edwards would have 4 touchdowns in the game, and Spurrier would throw his visor a lot, but not enough. I could never see too much Spurrier visor tossing and frustration. And the Dogs won that day in 1997, 37-17. I remember the headline in the AJC, Atlanta Journal-Constitution. The paper came out the next day on Sunday, and the paper said Thunder Dogs. Was the headline on that one, and I could not read that paper enough times. But instead of that portending great things for Georgia, we would go on to lose another 6 in a row in the series, and things would finally start to get a little better. And there's all these different ways you can look at it. I was always looking for some way to sort of position this series. How was it looking? We did kind of even it out, which is to say there's a lot of different ways you can look at this. We did kind of even it out. After losing 12 of 13, we would turn around then and kind of split the next 5. It wasn't a very even split. We won 1, then the Gators win 2, then we won 1, then the Gators won 3, and then we won 3 in a row. But if you count up that 10, we won 5 and they won 5. So all of a sudden, we had at least turned the series back around from having lost again, 13 out of 14, which is just unbelievable, to at least now, in the next 10 games, we go 5-5. And I remember feeling like that was progress. I remember talking to other Bulldog friends and people and saying, hey, at least it's an even series again now. But of course, we had given up 12 games of standing, so to speak, or again, when you count these against, so many over 500 or what's our record, we lost 12 games against 500 against the Gators in that span of losing 13 out of 14. But despite that, as it stands today, the series is 57-44-2, and I count it as 57 because I am a Bulldog fan, and Bulldog fans acknowledge that every game played counts. Florida has been for years trying to dismiss the first game in the series because they think somehow the fact that their university wasn't exactly the same then, or it was they started and then they moved and they changed and it maybe had this name or that name. And they sort of just want to ignore the fact that basically every college and major institution in the country started as one thing or another and then morphed over time and ultimately becoming the institution that they are today. Many of them were religious schools and then became non-religious affiliated. Some, were private schools that became state schools. All kinds of different things happened as schools formed and moved and became what they became. And Florida just kind of wants to ignore the fact that they did have a university and they did have a football team and they did play the University of Georgia. I think in 1904 was the first game. But they just kind of want to ignore that and say, nope, that game didn't count. We weren't really the Florida team we wanted to be. And of course, that wipes out one of their losses. So they count the series as 56-44-2, but Georgia fans count it as 57-44-2. Just like every vote counts, every game counts. So sorry, guys, you don't get to take that one off of there. But nonetheless, it shows that, and of course, we've had a better record in the last few years, but at one point, I think it got down to about a 6 or 8 game cushion for Georgia, 6 or 8 games over 500 against the Gators. But clearly, it had one time been well into the 20s, the advantage that Florida had or Georgia had over Florida. But again, we lost 12 games against that, and yet we still find ourselves today up by 13 games in the series. Now, we have turned the series around. We have won, and again, this depends on where you want to look at it. Like I said, if you go all the way back and you start counting that 5-5 split of games that took place from 2004 to 2013, and you count all the way forward from then to now, then in the last 21 games, then Georgia has a 12-9 record. So we're only 3 games over 500 during that span. If you look at the most recent series, you can say, well, Georgia's won 7 of the last 8, which we have. Or you could look at it and say we've won 10 of the last 14, which allows the Gators to, I don't like that as much. 10 of the 14 is pretty good, but that does include the fact that the Gators won 3 in a row in 2014, 15, and 16. And that was a bit of a sad time because those are great games that probably pushed the situation over the edge that got Mark Richt fired or released from his job here at Georgia and brought in Kirby Smart. Now, of course, it's been a great ride with Kirby Smart. And I think all of us can look back and constantly appreciate what a great man Mark Richt is. And I do think he is undervalued in what he did for the university from a football point of view. He certainly took us to a high level. Kirby has definitely taken it to another notch of elite. And it's certainly arguable that he would not have been able to get there if it had not been for Mark Richt preceding him. But one thing Mark Richt did not do very well was he was not able to really gain control of the Florida series. It did start to even out a lot more, but those 3 games, the losses in 14, 15, and 16, those were games, especially I think that 2014, that was a team that was expected to do really well. Florida was in kind of a mess. I don't even remember. I think they were in coaching flux, but it was just a game where Florida was not expected to be super competitive, or Georgia really should have won the game, and Florida just manhandled Georgia. You might remember they just ran all over us. They had 2 running backs go over 100 yards. They won the game 30-20, and the hard feelings from that kind of carried over for the next year or two. And by the time the next two losses came along, and then you had the whole famous situation with Rick switching quarterbacks and going to the backup quarterback to try to get some juice, and that not working, and it looking like a bad move with a bunch of interceptions and just not a good plan. That's when it started to feel like the time was there that, we need to move on, because one of the things, especially in the old East and West division, SEC, was if you couldn't win the East, you definitely weren't going to win the SEC. And if you weren't going to win the SEC, you're going to have a hard time positioning yourself for a national championship. Just like we've talked about these eras all season, this was the BCS era, and then the playoff era. And either way, though, it's still, we did miss out a couple times. And Mark Richt had a team, say, in 2007 that, arguably was worthy of winning or at least being in the playoff. And we did win the Florida game that year, which was great. We won 42-30 that year. So that was but yet we still came in with two losses, and we ended up being behind LSU. LSU gets in the game, and they get into the playoffs, and they win the national championship. So, it's just there's a lot to be said for the Florida game. The Florida game has caused us probably the most pain. I think lately everybody feels the sting of the Alabama games. And as we talked about coming into the Alabama game, Alabama has definitely taken the most from Georgia when it comes to SEC championships and national championships, especially in the last 10 years. But most of those games weren't scheduled. Most of those were games that were created by winning at the high level and getting to either the playoffs and the SEC championship game and running into Alabama there. Florida has had a long history of keeping good Georgia teams out of the SEC championship game, out of national title contention. Some of the best Georgia teams, thanks to losses to Florida during that long bad run, came up as teams that just ended up being very good. And we've talked about this before, teams that went 10-2 and finished number 8 in the country and went to a nice bowl game, maybe went to the Citrus Bowl, or maybe went to a decent January 1st bowl game, and wrapped up a 10-win season, finished in the top 10, but nowhere near the elite group of teams being talked about and mulled over and discussed either for the BCS or the national championship games in the bowl and poll era, where you just selected a team and stuck them in their bowl game and then hoped they would win. Overall, since I started as a freshman at Florida, we are a very sad 13-22 in 35 games against Florida. So we have yet to get a level of recompense against Florida. We talked about Tennessee earlier in the season and how we equaled, now this year, we equaled Tennessee's longest win streak in the season of 9 games. We now have a 9-game win streak against them. Florida's longest win streak ever in the series was 7 games, and we have equaled that before. We had a 7-game winning streak way back in history. We're on a 4-game win streak right now, and like I said, we've won 7 of 8. You can look at it and say we've won 10 of the last 14. And overall, we've had, like I said, a winning record in the last 21 games. We're 12-9, which doesn't sound like a big, but that's really, and this is a good example too, just for some contrast of what Kirby Smart has been able to do in his time. And Mark Richt did some of this too. And we're going to do a feature, I think, in the off season, or maybe in the gap when we get to the bowl games or playoff games. We might talk a little bit about the Mark Richt era and how he was able to really turn the tide with a lot of our rivals. Because I brought that up recently as we look at this season and we're thinking about what kind of season we're having. And now we're 7 games into the season. We're 6-1, 4-1 in the conference. We're ranked number 5 in the country. We're still right in the thick of, and the Ole Miss win last week certainly put us right back to where people, I think, were ready to dismiss us when we lost to Alabama. We fell all the way down outside of the top 10. We fell all the way down to number 12, probably still on the bubble of a playoff team, but clearly one loss could bounce us out of that position. Now with Ole Miss coming in as an undefeated team and ranked number 5, and then we were able to beat them at home, we switch places with them. We jump up to number 5. Like I said, on Tuesday, in the podcast on Tuesday. I think they earned a certain measure of respect even in the loss because they only fell from 5 to 8. They're still in the top 10. They're still solidly in a playoff position. Obviously, they, like us, have a lot of games against good SEC teams still to go. So 2 losses, you're probably still going to be, especially if you win one of these big games against a ranked team. Georgia has that advantage now. They've beaten a number 5 team. So actually, one of the things I'm going to talk about a little bit later, but I'll just go ahead and throw out. You look at our resume right now, 6-1, number 5 in the country, and we have wins against the current number 8 and the current number 17 team in the country. So that's really quite good. And our one loss is against the current number 4 team in the country, and that was by 3 points. And you might take a little negative on that and say, well, it was at home because you're supposed to win your big games at home. So it's a little bit of a negative. We couldn't win that game at home. But again, your one loss is to the number 4 team in the country and arguably a team that has the best resume in the country. Ohio State is getting all the love as the number 1 team, and their statistics are dominant. But if you dig inside their schedule, and I'm not going to say their schedule is nothing, it's not complete patsies. It's a bunch of okay teams. I mean, I think you look at Washington. I think you look at Minnesota, who they beat thoroughly most recently, 42-3. They went on the road and beat Washington 24-6. They beat Texas to open the season. So they did beat an SEC team. And of course, Texas is hardly, if we could pick a team to represent the SEC in a one game prove it, none of us would pick Texas. Texas is not the team that everybody thought they were to start the season, and they were anointed number 1, obviously without good cause. But right now, Alabama, the point I'm getting at is, look, Alabama is arguably the best team in the country. Despite what people think about Ohio State, nobody has a better resume than Alabama. Once upon a time, people were touting Miami and the first team in however long to win 3 straight games against ranked teams. But again, I like to see how these games age. It really means nothing that they beat teams that were ranked at the time they beat them. It's what are those games now? Like I said, our resume right now includes wins against the current number 8 team and the current number 17 team. So that's pretty impressive. You're going to have a hard time finding too many teams anywhere in the top 10 or 15, including Ohio State. Ohio State does not have a win against a current top 10 team. They don't have 2 wins against current top 17 teams. So, when you look at our resume, you can say, hey, wait a minute, this what we've actually accomplished, not just do we statistically beat a bunch of meh teams, okay teams, and have run up a bunch of stats. And I'm not blaming Ohio State. Your schedule is your schedule, and you can't always control that. Their conference, they did. I think the Big Ten does deserve, as a quick aside, a little bit of ridicule because they made such a big stink this year about, teasing the SEC and, well, maybe we'll play a nice easy schedule like the SEC, who's unwilling to go to 9 games. Well, look, 9 games in the SEC is not going to be the equal of 9 games in, hold on one second. I have to make sure that our camera, excuse me one sec, I apologize about this, but our camera is going to run short of battery. So we're going to give it a little juice there just to make sure. Sorry for the interruption. Anyway, 9 games in the SEC is definitely going to be something different than 9 games in the Big Ten. And the truth is right now, the Big Ten has often been top heavy. And sure, there's teams in the Big Ten that historical, especially this new expanded Big Ten where you have USC, you have Oregon, you have UCLA, you have Nebraska, you have Penn State. So, when you take it all together, the amalgamated Big Ten that they put together in the last couple of years with 18 teams spanning the entire country, you have a bunch of programs now who are, and I'm a history buff, I like to talk about where teams are. Look, history isn't going to win you any games today, but it's interesting. And as a fan, it's just part of our tribal connection to our teams, right? It's part of our fandom is, look, every year can't be a championship year. Every team's going to go through down seasons. Every team's going to go through down eras. We went through, as I've talked about many a time, and unfortunately for me, it was a time that started when I was a freshman in college. We went through the Ray Goff era, and then Jim Donnan came in and he made it better. But, he basically transformed us from a 5-6, 6-6 team to an 8-4 team. He had one 10-win season. He had a 9-win season, but he had predominantly when I think of Jim Donnan, I think of 8-4, touching the bottom of the top 25. Hey, that was better than 5-6 and 6-6, and he righted the ship against some of our key rivals. Then Mark Richt picked it up from him, took the baton, and ran even further. Really started taking it to a lot of our rivals, especially Auburn. The streak that we were talking about of how dominant we've been against Auburn over the last 25 plus years started with Mark Richt and Jim Donnan to some degree really turning that series around. Jim Donnan broke the 9-game winning streak that Tennessee had on us, and that was a good turn in the direction of turning that series around against Tennessee and changing what was going on there. So there, we began that process, and these rivalries give us something to enjoy, something to take a look at. In fact, again, talking about our resume for this year, when I look at our resume for this year, so far, 7 games through, here at our second off week of the year. So this is our last off week. Now we have a 5-game stretch to finish the season. We're going to have some tough games. We have one gimme game in the middle there with Charlotte, sandwiched in between, where we go to Georgia Tech. In the last game, or not at Georgia Tech because they sold the game. And so now it's going to be a quote unquote sort of neutral site game, but technically a home game for Georgia Tech at the Mercedes-Benz Stadium. So, but we get, Charlotte after we wrap up our SEC schedule. We get kind of a little bit of a breather, a chance to get some of the young guys in the game late in the season. I know a lot of the national media commentators, people that I like and follow. I saw Joel Klatt going through schedules and looking at teams, including the Georgia schedule, and he saw Charlotte on the schedule, and he just kind of went, ugh. And I get it. I understand from a national media point of view, you don't want to see cupcake games. You don't want to see payday games near the end of the season because now we're into rivalries and championships, and you're wrapping up, rivalry weekends, and you're wrapping up conference play, and you're deciding who's going to go in the conference championship, and then all of a sudden you have this sort of crap game stuck in the middle, right? But I think it actually makes a lot of sense. First of all, I'm glad not to have 4 of them just back to back or 3 of them back to back to back all at the beginning of the season. It was droll enough to have to live with Marshall and Austin Peay in back-to-back games to start this season. And, it's a good chance for guys late in the season who've come on, who've been practicing hard to get a reward, to get in there and get a chance to play, because the starters are not going to run long in that game, right? And it's a good chance it's not exactly an off week because we got this 5-game stretch to the end of the season. And then right after the Georgia Tech game, you're going to have a week later, if we make it, and we have been in it most of the last 5, 6, 7 years, you're going to have the SEC championship game. And so that's something we're usually looking at and planning on being a part of. And so, so then you have a 6th game in a row. And then now with the new expanded playoff, there's no longer the 1-month gap that you might have had. We kind of had that last year. We had a big layoff because we did have the bye as the SEC champion. So we had like a 3-week layoff. But if we end up as a host, a first-round host possibly, which that may be the position we're best suited in, or you look at right now, depending on where you think our chances are. And we'll lay that out a little bit more in subsequent discussion about where are we heading into the end of the season in this championship race. We've been talking about that all season, kind of comparing our results and our records to where we are. But right now in the SEC, you still have Texas A&M is undefeated. They got a big game against LSU. So as Georgia fans, let me just say we're probably rooting for LSU because Texas A&M is not in our control. We have a loss. Obviously, we lost to Alabama. Alabama has one loss on the season, but it was not in conference. It was to Florida State. So they are undefeated in the conference. Ole Miss was undefeated, but we beat them. So we would now have a tie-breaking position potentially against Ole Miss. And I'm not even going to dig too deep into the tiebreakers yet for the SEC, but certainly if us and Ole Miss are tied, the problem is how many other teams could be tied and who played who, and that's when you get into some crazy tiebreakers. But at a minimum, in a head-to-head against Ole Miss, if we both had the same record, we won the game. So that's at least a starter. In a head-to-head between us and Alabama, they won the game. So that puts them at an advantage. So obviously having a loss is is a disadvantage in the conference. So we still got a couple undefeated teams out there, and one team that is undefeated, and there's nothing we can do about it personally because we don't have Texas A&M on the schedule, is Texas A&M. So if we want to have a little bit of chaos, if we as Georgia fans want to be in the SEC championship game, then this weekend is probably one of the better opportunities. LSU has not looked great. They just lost at Vanderbilt last week, which either they're embarrassed by or is a good example of how good Vanderbilt has become. And it may be a little bit of both. Maybe they're embarrassed that they went on the road and lost to Vanderbilt. And, look, that maybe isn't even a knock against Vanderbilt because, frankly, LSU came into the season with national title aspirations. So they would argue that they are embarrassed to lose any games. They felt like they can, be the SEC champion, be a national title contender. So losing on the road to a good team is not what they had in mind, even if it's but for LSU or for Vanderbilt, this was the first time in recorded memory, just about, I guess, that they had been favored in an SEC game at home, especially in a ranked matchup. They won the game, and so now LSU's taken their second loss on the season, and things are looking a little bit dicey. They've lost to Ole Miss and they've lost to Vanderbilt, so they're already behind all of us: Alabama, us, Texas A&M, Oklahoma. Just they're behind everybody right now in the SEC, and so I think they're kind of out of our way. So that's where you would say, look, in the chaos theory, we would like LSU to step up this week and give Texas A&M a loss. That pulls everybody, but more of the teams back into the one-loss discussion, and LSU winning that game isn't going to hurt anything right now because they're a two-loss team. So, okay, so we dove into that a little bit, and we've kind of jumped all over the place, but all of these things were actually on the radar of points that I wanted to talk about today. So we scattered through a little bit. We started off with the Gator Hater segment, looking forward and to next week where we'll be all in on the Florida game. But I went ahead and teased a little bit of the history, the personal history. One thing I guess I just want to say, so depending on who's right, and we're going to say the game coming up will be the 104th game against Florida, although Florida thinks we're going to be playing the 103rd game again in the series coming up. But the net out of all that is this is a series that it's going to take a long time from my deep, long history. And I guess what I was trying to get at is, look, I don't know if you think I'm crazy when I talk about the history. I know I've explained that I was a history major and I'm a history buff, but I think it's one of the great things about college football, again, that we're not just limited to did we win a championship this season or not. And I know we've gotten focused on that as Georgia fans because we've had this great run where we've been a championship level team. And I made this point several times, but the rivalries are really where you come in each year and you say, look, this is the progression of the season. First and foremost, we want to have a winning season, right? And then we want to have the best winning season we can. Is it going to be a 9-win season, a 10-win season, a 12-win season? And as you go through those wins, you want to look at your big rivalry games. You want to say, how do we do against our rivals? So Alabama is not one of the longer historical rivals for people my age. I mean, you have to be a good bit older than me to remember when we played Alabama regularly every year, which Georgia and Alabama did play from early on in the SEC every year up until a time. And again, we went through that history before leading in the Alabama game, so I won't repeat it, but I think when I came, there weren't that many Alabama games when I joined, even though early in like I talked about the Bama game that I went to back in 1990, the Bama-Georgia game, either 1990, 1991, whatever it was. I talked about that and my experience sitting with the Bama fans at the underneath Sanford Drive, the Sanford Drive Bridge and Sanford Stadium. And anyway, that was exciting, but we just played them sporadically, and so I never thought of them as a big rival. And now they've become this bigger rival because of what they've done to us. But Florida has done the most damage in my fandom in my time. They have beaten us more than not. like I said, in the series, in the 35 games I've been experienced since I was a freshman, we have a losing record, and that's one of the only series you can say that about. We're 13-22, and that's just terrible. And so it's when you go back to the same theory I was talking about Tennessee, to even this up, to get back to where we were, to sort of equalize the series. We're on pace for that now. This 7 of 8 stretch we're on right now is great, and we want to see it keep going. But, again, in the big picture, in the last 21 games, we're no longer losing to Florida, but we're only 3 games over. So this is a much more competitive series, even though it feels like we've really wrested control over it. Even when we had wrested control of it, you go back to 2011, 12, and 13, we win 3 in a row, and it feels like we're really ascending to become the better program. And when you look at it historically, we are. This is Florida starting to become erratic. Georgia is ascending and becoming the much better program. And then, like I said, Florida comes in and rips off 3 in a row, at least 2 of which they really shouldn't have won, and these become the nail in the coffin for Mark Richt. And so again, these games and these series have consequence, and it just sets us further behind. I mean, if we win 2 out of those 3, instead of being 10 of our last 14, then we're 12 of the last 14, right? So then we're 12-2 in the last 14, and we're really on the way to just establishing dominance again and kind of starting to wipe out that record. Although you still, because they won 13 out of 14, you got to go a long way just to get to even, right? So we've still got a ways to go to balance out the last 35 years of history with Florida, and they have taken it to us, and they have cost us, and they're a big reason why we did not make it to the SEC championship game and did not win an SEC championship for 20 years. I mean, Florida's a big reason that happened in the series with Florida. So, I don't care if they're down. I don't care if they just fired their coach. And look, firing the coach, I think, makes them a little more scary, a little more unpredictable. Although I will say one thing I thought about that. I have no idea what it's going to mean. I see a headline. Now they're pulling out Steve Spurrier, the ghost of echoes and past. Steve Spurrier Jr. is going to be having a bigger hand in the offensive game plan for the game upcoming with Georgia. Billy Gonzalez, I think, is their interim coach, and so look, they're going to pull out all the stops, and sometimes an interim coach situation can be scary. UCLA looked like the worst team in football, and then they fired Deshaun Foster after an 0-4 start, and then UCLA has ripped off 3 straight wins since then. And again, same thing. They got Rick Neuheisel's son has taken over as the offensive coordinator, and they're carrying him off the field after wins. They're scoring points. Nico looks much better. All of a sudden, he looks like the quarterback that Tennessee wanted, and UCLA was happy to steal away. And so, I mean, sometimes the change can be a big deal. The one thing I will say is, just watching Florida the last couple of years, I don't know if it'll be the same kind of change you often see when a coach gets fired, though, because I don't think that Billy Napier ever really lost the team. I mean, sometimes you see when a coach is losing the team, and you can just see he's kind of standing there and holding his clipboard or scratching his butt or whatever they do on the sideline when things are going bad and fans are angry. And you can see that the team just doesn't look like they're playing hard for him. They're not responding to him. And of course, that's why you get fired midseason. And Billy Napier got fired, I think, because inevitability was on it. I mean, they won the game against Mississippi State, but it wasn't pretty. And I think they could just look at it and say, the situation's getting bad, the fans are over it, and they need to move on. And, you might as well move on now. So they parted ways with Billy Napier. But in this situation, I don't really think that, Florida played hard last year when we played them. They led early, and they were energized, and they had a good game plan. And, I'm not saying they would have won the game, but Lagway was hurting us a little bit. With his talent, he was very raw, but then he got hurt, and when he got hurt, then they had nothing. I mean, they'd already lost Graham Mertz, who had been the veteran quarterback that Lagway was supposed to learn behind, so they were down to a 3rd or 4th string guy, and they were terrible offensively, and it was easy for Georgia to kind of pull away. I mean, it was only a 2-score victory in the end, but Georgia was able to pull away, and because we had fallen behind, it's one of those, again, you have to look at the flow from the second, third, fourth quarters, and you look at it and you say, oh, well, we actually won that part of the game, whatever to whatever. So I think we were much more dominant the rest of that game once you got past the beginning of it, when you go back and look at it. But so I don't know. It's a little bit scary. We don't know what to expect out of the team this year. Florida, I mean, it's definitely going to be a wild card, but I don't think they're necessarily just going to be jazzed and juiced and like, oh, thank gosh, we got rid of this Billy Napier guy. Napier may not have had them very well prepared, and they made a lot of blunders on the field and just dumb coaching errors. And yet the team did not seem to be against him, and they seemed to play hard for him, especially defensively. They have been a good team defensively, and that's probably the scariest thing about Florida, is not what their coaching situation is, but just that they have been a really good defense most of the season. And, that when we last played a team with a really good defense in Auburn, it looked pretty scary. And I know that we did actually lose to Alabama, but we really showed some offensive ability early in that game, and we matched Alabama kind of for a good chunk of that game offensively. But Auburn was able to obviously get a good defensive and offensive matching game plan going in the beginning of that game that really made us look just stuck in mud and like it was not going to be our day. I mean, for most of that first half of the Auburn game, I think we all thought, oh my gosh, here's where Auburn really comes back and makes something of this. Let me just jump in. I think the other thing I wanted to do, so we've already touched base, so I wanted to just touch base a little bit on the history, a little primer on the Florida hating and where the series was and what's going on with them, and we've done that. Let me also just throw out a sad comment, or just a sad comment. I know you've all heard already, but very disappointed for Colby Young. He obviously had some difficult circumstances last year that kept him off the field, a little bit chaotic and strange. I don't want to get into that. I mean, domestic situations are ugly, and I don't want to pass judgment on those, but in the end, he was cleared, and the lady who originally accused him recanted, and once everything was adjudicated, he was found to be a guy who could come back to the team in good standing, and I think that's just where we pick it up. And he's worked hard, and he has been really a great looking player. I mean, he has been willing to block relentlessly on the outside for the run game and for other wide receivers. When he has caught the ball on some of these short screens that everybody's complained about, he has fought for hard yards. He's turned 1 and 2 yard catches into 8 and 9 yard gains. He's also been the recipient of a couple deep balls. The first touchdown against Alabama was a beautiful play where he just fakes out his defensive back, and he's just wide open, and Gunner lost it out there, 38-yard touchdown. And he was our leading receiver at the time he got injured, which was on the longest play of the game. I think we had a couple 36-yard plays in the game against Ole Miss, but he had the nifty catch and did a great job of getting separation, getting open on the little flea flicker play on I think the third in the first drive of the game against Ole Miss, and I think it was the third play. And so he's got a fractured leg, and he's going to be out indefinitely. I haven't. I've heard of people coming back from fractures, maybe, not that late, but, 5-6 weeks left in the season plus regular. I mean, it just, unless we make a deep playoff run and it's not that bad of a fracture, it seems unlikely that he would be much of a factor in this season. And I'm sad for him, and I'm sad for the team. It was impressive to see how well the team was able to just pick up without him. And I think Bobo had recently been quoted as saying that he knew that it was time to start really making sure that Colby Young got a lot of touches. 8, 9, 10 touches a game was the plan coming into the last game. And then he gets a leg fracture on the first time he touches it in the game. So terrible shame, but I just want to say, that about him. So let's go back to the team. I think the thing that I wanted to do today, outside of touching base on the history, and we've already kind of done it a little bit. I was just saying, let's talk about our resume. Let's talk about where Georgia is at this off week. So we've already said we're 6-1, 4-1 in the SEC, number 5 in the country. So we're in the running for the SEC. We're in the running for the playoff. And while we might have lost faith, even as fans, and while the national media definitely lost faith and was trying to look at all the other teams that might be out there, I think everybody looks right now and says, well, here we are again. Here Ole Miss was the new shiny happy toy that came in, and everybody wanted to see I think there was a lot of thinking that I mean, in the end, I didn't see that many experts actually pick Ole Miss to win the game. I think most people thought Georgia would win, but I think there was definitely a little bit of a hope and a thought that here's this undefeated Ole Miss team, can they get over the hump? And that's the shiny new toy, right? And Georgia's kind of the old, yeah, okay. And so the net result is the old, okay, here we go again. And I've heard a number of people around the country, some of the different national media and people starting to recognize when you start to look at how this season is shaping up, yes, Ohio State started near the top of the everybody's thinking because they were the defending national champion, even though in college football we really don't think of that as a defense. But they were clearly still a team to be reckoned with, and they've done nothing to take away from that. It's not their fault that their schedule has not given us a lot to really look at. And I say it's not their fault because, again, kudos to them. They scheduled Texas out of conference, right? So, Texas turned out not to be the top SEC team to have scheduled for that moment. So, and then Alabama starts the season with a loss to FSU on the road, and all of a sudden you've lost 4 times in the last 10 or 11 games, and everybody's panicking in Alabama, and you're starting to think about whether or not Nick Saban has to dust off the coaching hat and get back out there and throw DeBoer out. You hear everybody saying that, and but all of a sudden now Alabama, like I said, best resume in the country. They have 4 wins against currently ranked top 25 teams, and many of them fairly highly ranked teams, like Georgia, number 5 in the country, right? Alabama went on the road and beat the number 5 team in the country. They went and beat Missouri, who's a really solid, good team, and they went on the road and beat Missouri. They handled Vanderbilt, and Vanderbilt has proved to be a solid team. Are they a contender for the national championship in the SEC? I don't know, but are they really a top 10 team? I'm not sure about that either, but they are definitely at least a top 20 and maybe a top 15 team, maybe a top 10 team. And Alabama took care of them. So Alabama's been playing really good football and probably has the best resume going. So here's Georgia. We're at number 5. We're in the thick of everything. And what I guess I was trying to say with that is all of a sudden you see some of the pundits and people kind of coming back around to the idea that no matter how much they wanted to look away from it, what are we seeing right now in the top 25? What do you got in the top 25 for contenders as we head towards the playoffs? Well, you got Alabama at number 4, Georgia at number 5, Ohio State at number 1. This is looking pretty familiar. Right now, a lot of people and the odds, it doesn't really deal with the schedules when you just look at, but when you just look at where we're going to be in terms of wins and losses and what the predicted outcomes of the remaining games for Alabama, Georgia, other SEC teams, probably one of the most likely matchups right now for the SEC would be a rematch, which would be great. That's really at this point what I'm hoping for. It'd be fun if we got into the SEC championship game and got to play somebody new. So if it ended up being Texas A&M, I think everybody would think that's interesting and exciting to see Texas A&M get a chance. And it'd be nice if Texas A&M gets a chance if they have to take down one of the traditional powers in the conference, as opposed to coming in and getting a lesser opponent. So, I don't think people would be as excited. And again, I don't mean to say Ole Miss is a lesser opponent, but I don't think people would be as excited about seeing Texas A&M beat Ole Miss in a SEC championship game, or even Vandy or something like that. It would be fun and interesting, but it wouldn't show us that Texas A&M had done everything that you want them to do, finishing off the win by beating, say, Alabama or Georgia. If Texas A&M can get to the SEC championship game and they can beat Alabama or Georgia to win it, then that's really putting the cherry on top and saying you did the whole job, right? So I think that would be exciting. I think it'd be fun, but the way this season has gone so far, it would be nice to get another crack at Alabama. You've heard me say many a time, I really feel like we had that game, should have had that game. Won't be the same because it won't be at home this time if we get it, but I'd like to see that. So, so right now, who is Georgia? So Georgia, a couple other things we can say about Georgia is I want to give you some of the stats. We are game control wise, some of my game control stats I like to talk about. Right now, we're outgaining our opponents by 115 yards a game. That went up a little bit after the Ole Miss game. Coming into the Ole Miss game, I would not have told you that we would improve. I might have told you I thought we could win, And I think I did say I think that I thought we'd win. But I don't think I would have told you that I would have thought that statistically we would actually improve our yardage differential. But we did, because, again, as I mentioned in the breakdown of the Ole Miss game, we outgained them by 159 yards or so in the game. So that kind of actually added to our total. So we're outgaining people 115 yards a game. We're averaging 428 yards on offense and 313 yards on defense. That makes us the number 28 defense in the country in terms of total defense, and the number 37 offense in the country in terms of total offense. When it comes to scoring offense, we're the number 42 offense in the country, averaging just under 34 points a game. And as a defense, we're the number 32 scoring defense, giving up just about 19.6 points a game. And that went up again. We had it down to about 17 after the Auburn game, and it bounced back up after giving up 35 points to Ole Miss, back up to 19.6 or so. So we are beating teams by an average of 14.1 points a game. Last season, we finished the year beating teams average of 10.9 points a game. So an improvement there. And our yardage differential is up too. Last year, our yardage differential for the season finished at 75 yards a game. So nowhere near as dominant as we had been. We have often been a team that could be well into 100, 150, even 200 plus yardage differential in games. So we've done some good things. We've got a pretty good resume. And when it comes to looking at our rivals, so far, again, I was starting to say Alabama, not necessarily a traditional rival, but definitely a new rival and somebody we think of as a rival team. We lost that game, but we beat Tennessee and we beat Auburn. I don't think we're going to put Ole Miss in the rivalry category. I think we'll just call that a nice win and a great day to have game day in town and have all the focus at Georgia and in Athens. And we showed out, looked great, campus looked great, team looked great, and the atmosphere was electric, and we won the game. We're not going to call that a rival game. So we got Florida coming up. We got Georgia Tech still coming up. So, there's still work to be done out there. So we still got some more rivalry games we can talk about. But we've already, again, we already beat Kentucky. I don't think we're going to get too excited about calling Kentucky a big rivalry game, although that is, like we talked about, a game that we have historically played pretty much every year. So, that's let's see here. Let's just trying to say. So what do we got left? So again, we got Mississippi State, not a rival, and we got Texas. Now, I don't know if we're going to call Texas. Texas is coming to Athens. This is not a revenge tour like the Ole Miss game was, and like we hoped the Alabama would be. The Texas game we won. In fact, we won both games against Texas. So I guess the testament here will be, can we win 3 games in a row against Texas? If we beat Texas, we're not going to have a fourth. Texas, if we win the game against Texas, Texas has pretty much no shot of making the SEC championship game. I don't know that they really have that great a shot now, but so we got Texas coming up, and so that's that little back-to-back. So we have Texas on November 15th, then Charlotte on the 22nd, giving us a little breather between that and the big Georgia Tech game. And like I mentioned at the end of the podcast last time, right now the Georgia Tech game projects as a big time game, right? It's going to be on Friday after Thanksgiving. It's going to have its own time slot, not competing with the other games on Saturday. It's going to have kind of a premier marketed spot on TV. And again, if the game kicked off right now, you're talking about number 5 versus number 7, a 1 loss versus an undefeated team, a potential SEC champion versus potential ACC champion, or 2 teams that could play in their conference championship games, and 2 teams that could make the playoff, and then, depending on how playoffs go, meet again in the playoff. Imagine that. Imagine we saw it a couple years ago with the double Auburn game, where we got to have 2 Auburn rivalry games in 1 year, right? And that was pretty amazing. So Auburn beats us. We were number 1 team in the country. We go down to Auburn on the Silly Plains, and they win the game 40-17, just kick our butts. Gus Malzahn is, quoted as, saying they kicked our butt, and that didn't work out so well, because then we play them in the SEC championship game and we wipe them out 28-7, win the SEC championship, go on to the playoff, make it to the national championship game, and come 1 play short. So, but that was the last time we saw a kind of a repeat that carried. Well, no, that's not the last time. We saw the repeat then last year. We played Texas at Texas, and we get up. We get up by a big lead, 3 scores in the first half, and then we hold on despite some controversy in the second half, and we beat Texas. Then we go to the SEC championship game, neutral site. They have a slim 6-3 halftime lead. Gunner comes out and takes the helm after Beck gets hurt, and we pull out the overtime win and beat Texas and win the SEC championship. So, there was another repeat. So we could have a real, but more of like the Alabama-Georgia style repeat that we've seen in the past. It's very possible, depending on how the rest of the season goes for both us and Georgia Tech, it's very possible that you could have the win, that no matter who wins this game, that both teams could make the playoff, and then we could find ourselves in a playoff matchup, a repeat matchup with Georgia Tech in the playoff. And I just think that's kind of amazing. I don't know that I ever could have envisioned that happening. You go back and talk to 1990s me or 2000s me or 2010s me, and I don't think there's any way I would have understood how there would be 2 Georgia Tech games in the same season. So that's something to really consider. Okay, so that's where we are. We're taking stock of where we are, and I think 7 games into the season, we're basically where we thought we were going to be. I mean, most of the media thought we'd finally I guess the thing that was amazing is when we won the 2021 championship, you had the whole, we don't rebuild, we reload, and we come back and we're arguably better or different and better in different ways and maybe not as good in other ways in 2022, but still a dominant team. Still a dominant team in 2023. And I'm going to show you some of these in a minute because I think it's really interesting to reflect on that. I pulled some stats on this and we're going to go through them. So that's who we were for 21-22. But NIL, all the things we talked about, I won't keep repeating it, but we know it. Portal, NIL, payments to players, you name it, transfer, everything's changed the way the game's been played. We've talked about it. But it's also worth noting, by the way, that at some point, you can't just keep having the attrition that we would naturally have through draft and guys just running out of eligibility, right? I mean, when you have that many years of guys going pro, 14, 16, 15 guys going pro between draft and free agents and guys just aging out of eligibility, sooner or later it's got to catch up. At some point you're just losing too many people. For a long time we were able to do it in a way where we just, again, reloaded and had the next guy up mentality. But I think we are finally seeing this is a very young team, and it's young across the offensive line, but we see talent and they've been hurt. But we had the healthiest offensive line that we've had all season last game, and I'm hoping that with the off week here and a chance to get more guys healthy, it looks like Ernest Green's going to have more chance to play. Juan Gaston, all these guys are getting back to being healthy and being in the line. We started the first time in all season against Ole Miss. We started a line that we started in the game before, and there's a lot of things that went in an Ole Miss game. We're not just going to say it's all about the line, but hey, we did crank out our most yards of the year and most point, or second most points, right? 43 points, and 43 points in regulation, by the way, because we only had 38 in regulation against Tennessee. So we had 45 points against Marshall, but we're not counting that. So when we look at Power 5 teams, our most points in regulation against a Power 5 team and over 500 yards of offense, more than we had against Tennessee. And really just a consistently, just again, a more dominant looking performance because you didn't see as many flashy big plays, a couple big notable plays in the Tennessee game, but 34 first downs and scored on all 8 possessions we had the ball when we're trying to score and not just kneel down. And that's just as impressive as it could be, right? So I think you're seeing an offense that's getting better and better as the offensive line gets better, as the playmakers, Lawson Lucky pops out. I mean, now you're starting to see this kind of three-headed monster kind of thing going on, except it's more than three heads, right? I mean, there are different guys that I'm looking at and saying, hey, these guys can all make plays on offense. So yes, Colby Young got hurt, but London Humphreys has been making plays. Obviously, Zachariah Branch has been making plays. Nate Frazier's got his confidence back in making plays. Chauncey Bowens is making plays. Finally, we see our tight ends. Oscar Delp has made some plays, and Lawson Lucky had some huge plays. Obviously, 3 touchdowns in the most recent game. So you can't have, better than that. That was outstanding for him and outstanding for the team. And so, just more and more, we haven't seen Noah Thomas emerge, but chances are with Colby Young hurt, everybody figures Noah Thomas is going to get more playing time, and hopefully he's able to take the reins from that and step up. Because I know he wants to, and I know he obviously came here with the goal of separating himself even more from when he was at Texas A&M, and hope he gets that opportunity. So we're seeing this play, and Gunner, I truly believe in Gunner, and I kind of half jokingly in the last podcast mentioned Gunner for Heisman, but I think the more and more I think about it, I think why not? I mean, here's a guy who's just getting better and better. And when you think about it, and when you look at the plays, and if we have some time, I might save it for the next podcast. Maybe we'll do a whole feature on Gunner. I was going to throw in some Gunner stats. So I think I'm actually going to go ahead and call it now, because we're going to go through my look at the teams of the last 5 years but compared to this team as our final touch on how we're gauging this team. And then we'll call it for the podcast here. And then we'll come back on the next one, and we're going to do a little more retrospective, or not retrospective, but we're going to dig into Gunner. But what I can tell you is that Gunner is unbelievably clutch. I just got to thinking about it because he was, they made the graphic was up everywhere after the Ole Miss game. He was 12 of 12 in the second half for 135 yards and 3 touchdowns against Ole Miss. That's as clutch as you can get. You might be happy to know, I'll throw out this little teaser. Gunner is 4 of 5 passing on 4th down so far this season, having converted 4 of 5 first downs and 2 touchdowns out of 4th down plays. So, his passer rating, if you will, and I know that's a small sample size, though, is off the charts for 4th down. And his passer rating is distinctly better in the second half and distinctly better in the fourth quarter amongst all the quarters he plays. So the more the game is under pressure, and also his passer rating is at its best when Georgia has been 10 or more points behind in games. These are all little stat nuggets that I've seen digging around and looking at Gunner stats. So I think the answer is, it's hard to define clutch and what is really clutch. And there's always this discussion, is there a clutch gene? What is clutch? Does clutch really exist? I think we're seeing it right now. Gunner Stockton is clutch. He may not be the prettiest and the flashiest and the most just wow you with his arm or wow you with his speed or his size but he just makes plays, and he's getting better and better with each game. And, he's just doing whatever is needed to be done to help this team win. So I think that that's a big part of this team. And I think we can look at 7 games in the season. That's part of our evaluation. Say, we've got a quarterback, and we've got a quarterback that fits our coach's mentality. We've got a quarterback that fits our team and our fan mentality. I think Gunner Stockton is, and again, I don't like this ugly sort of comparison. I see all these things out there, Carson Beck's throwing 4 interceptions. Gunner Stockton was getting 5 touchdowns. Who won that battle? Look, again, Carson Beck, I don't think we gain anything or look like I feel like the University of Georgia should be represented by throwing mud on Carson Beck. Carson Beck played for 4 years at the University of Georgia. He got injured playing for the University of Georgia. He tried his best. He worked hard. He led us to an undefeated regular season in 2023. And I'm going to show you in a minute. There's some dominant stats about that team. And I've said this before. I don't see any reason to throw mud on Carson Beck. Carson Beck and Georgia parted ways. And look, it's working well, at least for Georgia, because Gunner Stockton has emerged, and we still have guys behind us, behind him, that look like they have talent. Puglisi looks like he's got an amazing arm and looks like a potential really good quarterback. And then you've got the number 1 overall quarterback recruit, and Jared Curtis is committed and coming in behind these guys. So right now, the quarterback position, as far as the future can see, and it's always a little dicey how long these things hold together because it's very volatile year by year in the quarterback room at a major university. But right now, the quarterback position looks really good. So, look, what I want to do now is I'm going to wrap up. I'm going to throw up some graphics. I'm going to talk about these, and I'm going to put these on the screen so you'll be able to see them as I go through them. But these are some graphics that tell you about where Georgia is right now as a team. And I say as a team. And what I was doing is I looked at and I'm comparing to some of the key Georgia teams of the last couple of years to give us some sense of where this team is by comparison. I know I've spent most of the season saying the comparison is between the other teams out there, and we're going to do that too. That'll be the next phase. So as we round out the off week and then go into the Florida week, we're going to look at the other contenders and see where everybody is again and say where do we sit with that. But right now, I think what we'll do is we start with 2025 Georgia compared to 2024 Georgia. So that's on the screen. I want you to take a look at it. Now, these are a lot of numbers and you see them, but I put them next to each other and you just start from the top. And this is courtesy of the stats. You can find them on nca.org. They have these, and so you just pull them together here. But you can see, like, offensively speaking, Georgia's gaining more yards this year than last year's team. We're definitely running better. We're the 37th. We're ranked 37th in the country rushing 190 yards a game. Last year we were 102nd, only 124 a game. You can see scoring offense, we're up a little bit. But it's kind of funny. We're up a little bit in points, and this shows you the vagary of the seasons, right? So, and of course, the season's not finished yet. So this season will finish differently in the stats from last year's finish. But 33.7 points a game right now for Georgia makes us the 42nd best team, as I mentioned earlier. Last year, 31.5 points, so a little over 2 points less, made you the 38th best team. So, I mean, I know that's not a big difference between 42, but it just shows you there's some vagary in it. Total defense last year, we were about 330. We're about 313 now. Pretty similar in rank. So most of that is pretty similar except for that rushing. You see that we're really rushing for a lot more. And when you look at the rushing defense, you see that one too. We were 36th in the country last year. Well, we've cranked that up a lot this year. We're 11th in the country. And so that's one of the things I guess I want to get at. If you look back at the last few years, you see a lot of elite stats. And so when we're judging where this team is right now, we haven't developed as much elite stats. But one of the things I didn't realize, and I think got lost a little bit for me in last season, in the fact that we did win 12 games, go to the playoff, and what do you call it? I said 12 games, but we actually won more than 12. We went 13-2, but win 12 games going into the playoff or going into in the regular season. Anyway, I can't get it all right. I'm sorry. I'm kind of fumbling over that, but we do have a really great season record wise. We end up going 13 and. No, what did we go? No, we did go 12-2. We played 14 games. I'm sorry. I should have put the record up. This just has the stats. But anyway, we go 12-2 on the season, which is a really elite record, and we win an SEC championship. That's the point I'm getting at. But when you look down these stats from the 2024 team by comparison to the 2025, what you see is, 51st in total offense, 38th in scoring offense, in run defense, you're 36th. In total defense, your scoring defense, you're 23rd. Third down conversion. This is a place where we really took a step back last year. Third down conversions. We went under 40%. We were 78th in the country in third down conversions. And our third down conversion, our defense third down wise, was still pretty good, holding teams to 32.8%. That's actually pretty good. We were 17th in the country there. And that's a place where we stepped up. So it's kind of funny. This year, you look across the stat here, we're 28th in the country. We're doing really good. We're back up to a more, maybe not elite, but a much higher level on third down conversions this year, almost 47%. That's 28th in the country. But and you're aware, if you've watched the games, our third down defense has not been nearly as good. We're 94th in the country, giving up almost 42% compared to last year. We were 17th in the country. Other things that I think jump out, last year we had not been the kind of dominant team on time of possession. And I think that goes back to our inability to stop the run and our inability to run. So we were 69th in the country. We were averaging 30 minutes a game of time of possession. This year we're back to we're 9th in the country in time of possession, averaging 33 minutes a game. So when you look up and down the stats, you look for the places where are we elite? Where are we putting together really top numbers? And there's not a lot so far this season. We're 11th in the country at rush defense at 91 yards a game. And we're ninth in the country at time of possession, which again, those are pretty complementary stats at 33 points a game. Otherwise, we're kind of in the top 30 or 40 in a lot of categories, maybe top 20 in some. So the stats show that we're a good team, but not a dominant team, not like we have been. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a look at, I want you to see the 2023 team. Well, no, actually, let's go to the 2018 team. So I think this was an interesting comparison. This was our first championship team, and that team felt like a scrappy team. I say our first championship team. This is the team that wins the SEC championship, like I said, just against Auburn, and makes it to wins the big Rose Bowl against Oklahoma, and then loses the national championship game to Alabama. That team felt a little scrappy to me when I think about it. Not so much like a dominant team like 2021, 2022. So, but here's the stats on comparison. And kind of some of what I was thinking is right. You see that we're kind of similar offensively. We're very similar teams last year or this year and that year. They were that team was 32nd in the country, 435 yards a game. Much better rushing team. We were ninth best in the country that year, 258 yards a game. So really dominant run game. Scoring offense was 20th in the country, 35 points a game. We're 42nd in the country this year at 33, almost 34 points a game. Again, shows you some flux in seasons, right? 35 points a game was 20th. 34 points a game this year's 42nd. So people are scoring a little more right now. Total defense, that team was 294. This team is 313. 313 is good enough for 28th best team in the country right now. 294 that year was good enough for 6th. So that was a dominant defense. They were 6th in total defense. They were 6th in scoring defense, only allowing around 16.5 points a game, whereas this year we're 32nd in scoring defense, allowing 19 points a game. Third down conversions, again, they were 11th in the country, almost 46%. Third down defense, they were holding in right at 19th in the country at 33%. So time of possession, again, 19th in the country, about 32 minutes a game. So, you see some numbers where offensively, I guess we would say we were a top third team offensively in 2018 and an elite defensive unit. Although elite defense might not have been quite as dominant as it would take to be right now. Because again, just under 300 yards a game was 6th in the country, but we were only giving up 16.4 points a game, and that is really stout. So that's kind of how this 2025 team compares to the 2018 team, gives you a little feel for where we are. What I would say is, I don't know if we're going to see a lot of growth statistically, because again, we got to play Texas, we got to play Georgia Tech, and we got to play Florida. I don't think Florida's going to put up a ton offensively against us, but it could be, the initial impression is that you probably think that's going to be a game where both teams maybe score in the 20s, or maybe we get in the 20s and they're in the teens if we win it. Florida's not really good offensively, but they're very good defensively. Same thing, Texas. Texas is a chance to see the defense get better. I guess that's one thing to point out. When you look at our defense right now, one of the things that is worth remembering is we played Alabama, Tennessee, and Ole Miss. And those are three. Alabama's maybe not as elite, but Tennessee and Ole Miss are top 10. They're top 10 offenses. They're both averaging over 500 yards a game in offense. So not everybody who's got amazing defensive stats or is leading defensive categories has played two teams that are true Power 5, Power 2 conference teams, SEC Big Ten style teams that average over 500 yards a game and over 40 points a game. We played two of them. And then Alabama's right up there in the top 25 or 30. Also an elite offensive team, passing wise, not so much running, but overall, some fairly high level offensive stats. So, that's one thing that might sort of work its way out, even though we got some good games coming up. Texas is challenged offensively. Florida is challenged offensively. Georgia Tech is a very good offensive team. So, but, and then we got Charlotte on the schedule. That's a stat padding game for sure. And then, Mississippi State is actually scoring some points. So it'll be interesting to see. That'll be one of those games where we have to hope that our defense steps up and does kind of what they did against Kentucky, which is starts to show the talent advantage that they should have and execute. Although Mississippi State's been scoring points on people. So, we'll have to see. But I want you to see these comparisons because I think it does give us a sense of where this team is and where it could grow into if the defense continues to improve. And the offense continues to improve, and they might, because I think we've seen a lot of growth in the offense, and with the offensive line being healthy, but we are going to be playing. So I don't know if we're going to see a lot of stat growth offensively, though, because we are going to be playing several or at least a couple really good defenses in Florida and Texas coming up. Just by comparison, I'm going to flip up the stats here for the 2021 national championship team, first national championship team. You can see that team was also 26th in total offense, 10th in scoring offense. So there's a big bang in the buck there for scoring, and I think that's because the defense actually scored quite a bit, which helped outpace the offense a little bit. Scoring defense was number one in the country that year, 10.2 points a game, and in yards allowed they were 13th, but no, that's in passing yards allowed. I'm sorry. In total defense, they were second, only allowing 269 yards a game. So very elite defensive numbers and top 25, top 30 offensive numbers combined to be championship numbers. Also, time of possession was just about even. They were not as much a time of possession team. They did continue to be a very good third down conversion team, 45% a game only, and defensively only giving up 36% a game. So overall, not as dominant statistically as you might have thought, but definitely those defensive statistics. Total defense number 2, rushing defense number 2 in the country, team passing defense number 2 in the country, scoring defense number 1. Just some very elite numbers there. Red zone defense also number 1 in the country. So some really impressive numbers there. And so by comparison, again, you see that we're not, offensively, we're not far off what that team was doing, but defensively, we've obviously are a big step back. And I know you know that. You're saying, why? Of course, I've seen that on the field. And yet, let me go back to the stats while we're here for a second looking at this. Look over these stats. I mean, we are 28th in the country in total defense, 313 yards. And and here, let me jump ahead. I'm going to show you. Let's go back to the comparison with 2024. We are ahead of last year's team. Last year's team was 329 yards. So as much as it feels like this team is getting their butt kicked defensively, they're actually ahead as far as yardage goes. And they're a little bit ahead. They're about a point a game ahead when it comes to scoring defense. So yardage and scoring defense. And then the other one that I think offensively, the team has taken a big step forward, being almost 47% on third down conversions. And again, I think that's that grittiness and that keep the chain moving mentality of Gunnar Stockton. And I think that's making games more winnable because you have to excel at something, right? So at least you see here, look, we're not putting up the most points and the most yards a game, but we're dominating time of possession, and we're really doing great on third down conversions. We're able to keep the ball, and keeping the ball is something that really made a difference against Ole Miss. We just dominated the time of possession, and clearly if we had given them more chances, I think they could have scored more. So it was important that we were able to just find enough stops in that game and grind out just enough scores ourselves. But limiting the game to only eight true possessions for each team, I think, turned out to be a winning formula for us. So the last one I was going to throw up here, the last couple, is the 2022 team. 2022 team just had dominant stats. If you look down that line there, you see, I mentioned this earlier, when you actually look at it, the 2022 team is probably more dominant, statistically speaking, than the 2021 team, even though the defense was credited in 21 as maybe being the best, one of the best ever in college football. But the offense really came on with abandon in 2022, and the defense was still very elite as well. And you just see a big difference. I mean, you can see that we don't look like this team anymore, but this just highlights what I've been saying. Look, there isn't, there aren't any teams that look like this. I mean, number 5, 500 yards a game, number 5 in total offense, and in total defense, number 9, 296 yards a game. So, you have over a 200-yard differential when you talk about game control. Scoring defense, 14.3 points a game, number 5 in the country. I mean, all these numbers up here by the ranks are just number 7 in the country in time of possession, third down conversions. You're 6th in the country at over 50%. The 2022 team, third down conversion defense, you're 2nd in the country at under 30%. You're 26.6% on defensive third down conversions. I mean, you're getting third downs over 50% of the time, and you're holding teams to almost only getting third downs about a quarter of the time. You're also number 1 in red zone offense and number 2 in red zone defense. I mean, this team in 2022, I think. And of course, they do go 15-0, right? They are the undefeated national champion. The 2021 team, I think, will always have that special memory for everybody because it was the breakthrough, and that defense just seemed unbelievable. And yes, they took a little bit of a step back. I mean, they were giving up 14.3 points a game instead of 10, the next year in 2022. But just really an amazing team. And then the last one I'm going to put up, the 2023 stats by comparison to 2025. What I think is surprising is I think it's easy to forget because we all know the disappointment. And again, this is the Carson Beck era. So this may give you a little perspective on Carson Beck. Look, total offense, 5th in the country, 496 yards. And I know we still had Ladd McConkey and Brock Bowers, obviously, during that time. And they were clearly big contributors to that. But total defense, you're 9th in the country, 289 yards a game. Scoring defense, you're 5th at 15.6 yards a game. Third down conversions, 50, you actually went up 55%. You're number 1 in the country. Third down defense, you went down to 25.7%. So, I mean, you're number 1 in both categories, third down conversions and third down defense. Red zone offense and red zone defense took a little bit of a hit compared to the year before, but you're still number 2 in the country in time of possession. What this reminds me of is, again, this team goes 12-0, gets to the SEC championship game, loses to an Alabama team that's still Alabama, but frankly, by comparison to this team, was not as good and was a much more flawed team. And Milroe was not as good at running the offense. They were not as good an offensive team as this team was. I don't think they were quite as good a defensive team, and you go back and look at the stats, prove it. But they beat us. They take our position in the playoff. They go and they lose the first game to Michigan, and Michigan goes on to win the national championship and gets all this credit for being undefeated, 15-0, and clearly dominant national champion. I have not gotten over this, and this only reminds me that I won't get over this. This season was... I mean, these stats are national championship stats. And when you see them by comparison to a good team, a team that's number 5 in the country, okay, and you look on the right side and then you look on the left side of the graphic there, you just see that that 2023 team was a championship team. And it just, the more I think about it, the more it really galls me that losing that game. And it's the timing of it too, right? This team losing the SEC championship game to Alabama the very next year might not have even cost you much in the way of seeding. I don't know. I guess the way they did it with the conference champions, you still wouldn't be a bye. But this team, I think, could have waltzed through the playoff. And I'm not saying it definitely would have beat Michigan. There's no way you can say that. But I would love to see that matchup because when we played Michigan 2 years before, it wasn't that close. And I'm sure they closed the gap some, but this team was still a really dominant team. And when you compare it to this year's team, when you compare it to the kind of teams that are out there, this just gives you, all of this is an exercise in just giving you a sense of where we are as a team. We really are a lot further back statistically than these teams that we remember, 2018, 2021, 22, 23. But you see that we're actually a step up in most categories from the 2024 team. And that 2024 team goes 12-2, wins the SEC championship, and makes it to the playoff and gets a bye, right? It didn't go well in the playoff. We've talked about that. There's a lot of reasons for that, but still a very successful season and a national championship contending season. And a team that, and this team, while defensively it has felt like this team is not as good. They have actually been, I mean, I guess watching some of these teams just pick us apart in the first half has made it feel like this team has more holes. But defensively speaking, this team has vastly improved its run defense. It has offensively vastly improved its rushing offense, which has allowed it to vastly improve its time of possession. And it is an elite company on rushing defense and time of possession. So those are the things we really do hang our hat on. And while you may not say 28th in the country in third down conversion is elite, there's a lot of teams packed in that. I mean, 47% is a very high number. You're not going to see that a lot. So the difference is that this team is 94th in the country, this year's team, giving up almost 42% on third down. And I think what you see is if they can cut down those third downs, if we can just stop half of those first downs that we've been giving up in the first half, and if in these last 5 games after this off week, if we can continue to improve, make the adjustments, do the things that are necessary, the coaches look at what they can do to help the team out a little bit, I think what you see is you see a lot of upside. There's a chance. I was saying, I don't know if we're going to gain a lot statistically, like these numbers are going to get a lot better. Maybe they do defensively because you're playing some weaker offensive teams down the stretch, with the exception of Georgia Tech. So maybe we do actually see the numbers look a little better. Maybe we move up into the 20s and teens in some of these categories defensively. But the big difference is you've already done some good things, and you've already done some things we set out to do. Running the ball better, stopping the run consistently, regaining time of possession. And those things have made a big difference. Those things have mattered in games against Tennessee and Ole Miss that we won. And they gave us a chance in the game against Alabama. I mean, we ran the ball viciously against Alabama. I mean, Chauncey Bowens had 119 yards. We ran for over 227 yards, or around 227 yards. So that we are doing some things at a high level, but you see this comparison, it's not yet quite elite. But when you see how many young people, you think how young our offensive line is, when you think about some of those offensive playmakers coming together, when you see the growth of Gunnar Stockton, and when you see a defense that is learning how to make stops in the second half, and at least, yes, Gunnar and the offense, basically win the game last week with 8 consecutive scoring drives, right? But the difference in the end still ends up being the defense, after not stopping anything, giving up 5 straight touchdowns. Then they go 3 and out, and turnover on downs in 5 or 6 plays, and they shut down the game. I mean, they did rise up after looking kind of beat up for a long time, and rise up and win the game. And statistically speaking, they're actually a better defense on paper right now than last year's defense. They're just in this one area in particular giving up too many third down conversions. And so it just feels like, I feel a slight sense of optimism I didn't have before I looked at this, that just says, wow, if we can just turn that third down conversion rate around, then I think we're going to see a really different potential, for the rest of the season. I mean, and maybe that's something that they can do and work on during this off week. At least I hope it is. So, listen, I have enjoyed bringing this to you. I hope this is a good retrospective on where we are 7 games into the season, where I think we can go, what we're looking for coming up. We'll dig into some of the other contenders. We'll dig more into Florida and the history, and where Florida is. I don't know if how much analysis we can do. Kind of a wild situation with the coaching staff changing, and it just may be a totally different team on the field. So anyway, I hope you enjoy your non-Georgia football weekend, whatever you choose to do. Hopefully the weather will be nice and you'll have some opportunities. At least it's getting a little cool, starting to feel like fall. And then it's time to go into full Gator hating mode, where every day we focus on how much we hate the Gators and how important it is to just keep piling on. I don't care if they lost their coach or they fired their coach. I don't care if they're in turmoil. I don't care what the situation is. There is no amount of damage that we cannot continue to inflict on the Florida Gators. So let's just focus on that, put all of our energy in that after a nice restful weekend. I hope you have a great time and a great weekend. I will try to be back with another podcast over the weekend, and coming into the week, we'll get started again, and we'll try to go every other day on the week. So thank you so much for being here. Go Dogs.